after EPA, fatty acids, and phosphatidylserine, I would say third on the list of things that come from food that can readily support brain function would be choline. And that's because of the relationship to choline in the biosynthesis pathway for acetylcholine. Acetylcholine is a neuromodulator, not a neurotransmitter, but a neuromodulator in the brain. A neuromodulator is a chemical that modulates the function of many brain circuits and also circuits within the body. I'll mention what those are in a moment, but acetylcholine as a neuromodulator tends to enhance the activity, the electrical activity and chemical activity of certain sets of neurons and downplay the activity of other neurons. So it's sort of a conductor of sorts, leading to enhanced function and activity in certain brain areas and circuits and not in others. For instance, the brain areas that are involved in focus and alertness. We have multiple clusters of neurons in our brain that make acetylcholine. Two of the most prominent and well-known are the so-called nucleus basalis, which is a cluster of neurons deep in the basal forebrain that highlight particular areas of our brain. Highlight meaning when acetylcholine is released from those neurons at their nerve endings in particular areas of the brain, those particular areas of the brain can undergo enhanced levels of activity relative to surrounding areas. So it's kind of a electrical highlighter pen, if you will, by analogy. That is the basis of much of what we call focus or our ability to concentrate on a particular batch of information that's coming in through our eyes, our ears, our nose, or even things that we're just thinking in our head. So having ample choline for production of acetylcholine allows for focus through, of course, many intervening steps. There are also regions of the brain in the so-called back of the brain, the hindbrain, that release acetylcholine that are involved in general states of alertness. And not surprisingly then, many of the treatments for Alzheimer's disease, which is an inability or challenges with remembering things and focusing, are drugs that impact the acetylcholine pathway and are aimed at enhancing the amount of acetylcholine that's available to neurons. And it can do that through a number of different mechanisms. You can do that by enhancing the amount of acetylcholine that's created, or you can do that by taking a drug that can reduce the amount of enzyme that gobbles up the acetylcholine, and in doing so, leading to more net acetylcholine. But outside of the scenario where somebody has cognitive decline due to Alzheimer's, all of us are able to focus to some degree or not, or are able to be alert to some degree or not, based on the amount of acetylcholine that we have. Now, other processes, of course, are involved, but what this means is that making sure that we have enough of the substrates to create acetylcholine is vital if we want to be able to focus. And that's why dietary choline is so vital. And the primary source for dietary choline would be eggs, and in particular, egg yolks. And this, again, has a very interesting relationship to our evolution as well. We're always referred to as hunter-gatherers, but when one hears hunters, we often think about meat and animal sources. And indeed, as a species, we hunted many other species of animals to consume them and still do. But we also fished. We talked about that earlier and consumed a lot of fish, and we consumed a lot of eggs. Eggs are an incredibly rich source of nutrients for the brain. And that's because the egg actually, if you think about it, contains all the nutrients that are required in order for an organism to grow. You know, a bird that's in a eggshell, it's got the yolk there, and it's using that yolk for a reason. It's using that yolk as a source of fuel. It's using that yolk as a source of literally building blocks in order to create its nervous system. Many years ago, I worked on chick embryos, and there's these amazing experiments. You could actually take an egg and you could create a little window in the top, and these were fertilized eggs, and you'd see over time, you could peer in there, literally look in with a microscope or even with the naked eye, and you would see this little chick embryo sitting on top of that yolk, growing and growing and growing and growing, and the yolk getting smaller and smaller. It's really incredible. They're using that as a source for all the building blocks of the body, but in particular, the nervous system. So eggs are a rich source of choline. Some people will supplement with choline. However, food sources seem to be the best source of choline. And as with the EPAs and the omega-3s, there are plenty of foods that are non-animal based that contain choline. So if you're somebody who doesn't eat eggs or doesn't want to eat eggs, things like potatoes, nuts, and seeds and grains and fruit, they don't have as much choline as eggs, but they do contain choline. So you can look up the values of choline that are present in those various foods and make sure that you're reaching the threshold amount of choline for you. in general, most people should probably strive to get somewhere between 500 milligrams and a gram of choline per day, so 1,000 milligrams. And some people rely on supplementation in order to hit those levels because they're not eating a lot of egg yolks or they're not eating a lot of other foods. Certain fish contain choline, for instance, and the other foods I listed off a few minutes ago from plant-based sources. So some people will supplement with 50 to 100 milligrams or whatever amount is necessary to get them up to that 1 gram or even a 2 gram dose per day. So we have 3 things that we know can support nerve cells. EPA, in particular omega-3 fatty acids, phosphatidylserine, and choline. Those 3 things I would list off as the top 3 things for enhancing neuron function and the integrity of neurons in the short and long term.